Welcome back to the channel. With this update, we've had some huge changes and a lot to talk about. We're going to go through them. It has to do with weapon descriptions and what they actually do within Warzone for the various Cold War weapons, especially the ones that people are using on a regular basis. If you enjoy the video, learn something new, please do me a favor, hit that like button. Goal on today's video is actually 10,000 likes. It's the highest goal I've ever set, but I think you guys can crush it. If you're brand new or just haven't yet subscribed, double check, make sure you are subscribed, because currently 57% of you guys watching right now haven't hit the subscribe button with notifications on. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is this season 2 update and how it affects attachments. They basically made it so you can trust the game now. And I know that's kind of really contradictory, but because they've done that, they've also destroyed a lot of the attachments within the game. So I'll give you a quick example. So before, what would happen is if we went to the XM4 and I went to go equip attachments, I'd go through these and I go, well, they don't actually do that, or they do sometimes and then they don't in others. Based off every attachment that I tested, which are pretty straightforward ones, that things I can test, it looks like these are just a lot more accurate. Obviously, we got to go through a fine-tooth comb, test different weapons, and make sure if there's any outliers, which there may be. They're going to make mistakes. They've been making mistakes for several months since the integration and kind of destroyed a lot of these attachments. But one of the biggest changes they've done is when they had the integration, they put out the agency suppressor like this: sound suppression, vertical recoil control, effective damage range negative, bullet velocity negative, and that was the way it was. And then they swapped it to make it more like the monolithic, because everyone complained. They're like, what's the point of using it if it's hurting your bullet velocity? Then they reverted it, and now it actually hurts your bullet velocity, which I'm going to show you in game so you can see exactly what it looks like. But what they've done is they've made it so that whatever these pros and cons are, they're pretty accurate. So if it's saying it's doing something, more than likely it's doing that. The other thing is, before with the barrels, when they said it increased bullet velocity or range, it actually did the opposite for the Cold War XM4 and the Cold War AK-47. They've gone and fixed that. I went through and tested extended, just double checking. It actually increases the bullet velocity by 100%. So it's in line with a lot of the other Cold War rifles that we saw. But now the actual descriptions match with what it's actually doing. So in this particular case, the reinforced is going to give you effective damage range and bullet velocity like it did before for other rifles. But now it's going to actually apply to the XM4. So a huge change. But this throws everything off, because there's so many loadouts that you would try to build for range. You want them to have added stability, faster aim down sight time. We're gonna have to check a little bit more in details on that. But I just want to give you a heads up in terms of these setups. They basically destroyed almost every Cold War weapon with this change here. The exception that kind of gets away from that is probably the MAC-10 or other SMGs, because that one says it only impacts the range, but since you're using it point blank, not a huge deal. When it comes to the Tundra, it ends up being that this actually, the rep suppressor is going to terribly destroy your bullet velocity. And I'll go through the various changes so you guys can see for yourself, and I'll give you kind of a snapshot of everything I tested. So basically, I went through and I tested bullet velocity for the agency suppressor on the FFAR, because everyone was saying it felt different. And this is the case. It actually feels different because it's nerfing your bullet velocity. When you see this thing go through the air, it's clear that it's moving slow. You can see the bullet drop, and how far it drops is a huge difference. You can see the little bullet go whoo, whereas before, when it has high bullet velocity, it literally like almost instantly, like in 500 milliseconds, versus that's like almost like a second and a half for it to hit the target. So you're losing a lot of bullet velocity on those. So anything that you were going to use at range, you can't use a suppressor. And 99% of players, when they're setting up their loadout, they're using a suppressor because they want to stay off the minimap, especially when you get into late game situations. You're not going to want to give away your position. So I did that, and I did that for various weapons. I also did it for the Tundra, and this thing should be going boom, getting better bullet velocity, but this thing is terrible. You can see how low the bullet drops. It's not good. It is not good. It also impacts the M16 and the AUG, but I wanted to show you that as well. So you see the burst, you see where it drops, and you have those. This is kind of the testing I did, and I'll go through some of the findings. The other thing I did test really briefly, like I said, I'm going to do a more extended video talking about a little bit of all these changes popping out. I'm sure other people like True Game Data, Exclusive Ace, Drifter, Ponyhoff, there's going to be a lot of people testing all kinds of stuff, and they're going to have different findings, because only one person can find so much at one time. And that information is going to be spreading pretty rapidly. What this also means is the bruiser grip is no longer going to help vertical recoil because it no longer says it helps vertical recoil, which is kind of a good thing. You can literally trust that, but it makes it so a lot of attachments are obsolete. So the other thing I was going to get to is this is the no glint part of it. I'm using the 4X. I still want to try it out. I end up basically going here and I let the guy kill me so that in the kill cam, I can see if there's an optical glint. So you can see when he's looking at me, there's no glint on me at all. So that kind of tells you that. I do the same thing here. I shoot this guy so he kills me. Boom. And then you can see that's a 20X. No optical glint when he looks at me. He snapped and just went off, huh? So there are those changes, and there wasn't really necessarily stealth changes in that sense, because they're literally just changes, but they told us what it is. But now we have to go in and back and test exactly what is different. So I'll list off everything I tested pretty easily, but this just gives you a demonstration of what I went through to kind of find out what those differences are. So this is my Twitter. If you want to follow, it is linked down in the description. It's just JGOD if you're a fan of Twitter. We're getting close to 50,000 followers on there. So if you want to go ahead and check us out, you're more than welcome to. But right here, I did the 4X and the 20X are still no glint on Cold War snipers. We go into the next thing, looking things like they actually match the description in game. XM4 extended has 114 bullet velocity. Previously, it was negative 21 because it was bugged. Same thing for the AK-47, same attachment. We have the Stoner and RPD. The agency suppressor actually reduces your bullet velocity by 34%, which would make it almost unusable. And obviously, it's slow. You want to use it for long range, and you want to have a short to medium option for up close. That kind of destroys that. You're not going to be able to run a suppressor on Cold War guns for the most part. Stoner, RPD, Cavalry, Spetsnaz. That was the cavalry barrel. Now it only does 50% bullet velocity, and instead of previously it was 80. I still got to go ahead and test their base bullet velocity, but I just compared the actual barrel with the gun previous numbers, and it was 50% versus 80%. So either the barrels were nerfed or the base bullet velocity was lowered, so you're still getting plus 80%, but it's of a lower number. If that makes sense. Obviously, you know, it sometimes doesn't. Also, I went through FFAR, 36% bullet velocity. It might just be some frame rounding. It's actually 39%, 40% is the number, which that is just atrocious to bullet velocity. You go from as close as you can to having hit scan to nothing close to hit scan at all. M16 agency suppressor, same thing. And that should be most likely the same for all the tactical rifles, because that's kind of what we're discovering. If it's listed as reduced bullet velocity, you're probably tanking your bullet velocity by about 40%. AUG, base bullet velocity was buffed. They mentioned this in the patch notes. They didn't say by how much, but they bumped it up basically to 600 to match the M16 based, which basically means there's no reason to use the M16 other than the actual recoil pattern. One goes straight up and one kind of V's out like in a pattern a little bit odd. I tested the MAC-10 agency suppressor. There's no bullet velocity change, but the description says there's no bullet velocity change anyways. It says there's a range difference. So I have to manually go in. Hopefully it's only like 10%. You won't even notice it. And then you can still use it on your MAC-10. And that's probably going to still be one of the viable options. But you might need to change the barrel because the task force is going to have more recoil if it says it has more recoil, which kind of throws all these attachments out of whack. Tundra and Pellington, I checked the wrap suppressor. You lose 30% bullet velocity. And what they've done here is they've essentially ruined all the Cold War guns, with the exception of being able to use them point blank close range, and in the form of sniper support. If you're going to actually use this at range, none of these guns are going to be practical in a real sense, just because that bullet velocity is going to be destroyed. Normally you're looking for a long range option, have anywhere between 850, 900, all the way up to about 12, 1300. A lot of the modern warfare guns, they've gone and destroyed a lot of these numbers. So hopefully that kind of clears it up, makes a little bit of sense. If it does, please do me a favor, hit that like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back, double check, make sure you subscribe with notifications on so be available for future updated videos. I do appreciate all the support on the content, that you bear with me as I kind of ramble through this, but I think this is a way you gotta kind of show the information, or else it doesn't always make sense. Appreciate all the support on the channel. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.